When Labour negotiates, Britain loses. He talks about a hat trick of deals. They are own goals. In 2020, the Conservatives concluded the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the largest and most comprehensive free trade agreement in the world. We agreed to come back in 5 years to improve terms. This renegotiation should have been an opportunity to improve terms for our country. The terms are improved for the EU. And the Prime Minister can dress it up as much as he wants, but he has failed. It is bad for bills, it is bad for jobs, and it is bad for borders. This is not a deal made for Britain. This is a deal made for Labour's PR, to show them on the world stage. But it is a stitch-up for our country for their short-term headlines. Let's take the Prime Minister's abject failures one by one. First, on fishing. He has given away the prize most desired by EU member states and done so for almost nothing. Mr. Speaker, it is very easy to sign deals if you're prepared to give everything away for pennies. This deal locks out our fishermen until 2038. We are now in a worse position than the Faroe Islands, a set of islands with a population of Scarborough, but who get to have annual negotiations. And the Prime Minister quoted some organisations welcoming his deal. He doesn't listen to them normally, but he left one out deliberately. The National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations, who have described the deal as a surrender and a giveaway. This is a Prime Minister who would pay to give away his family silver. Why is the Prime Minister selling our fishermen down the river? Is it because they don't vote Labour? Even the defence commitments in this deal are hopelessly one-sided. We're making payments, but they are offering dialogue and consultation. This is a pitiful return for the country that leads NATO in Europe with troops on the ground in Estonia defending our allies. Can the Prime Minister tell us why there's not a single word in his statement about the money we will now be sending to Brussels? And can he set out how much those payments will cost taxpayers? Mr. Speaker, in government, details matter, and so does honesty. They're laughing, but this is a bad deal for the country. Look at them. This is how they laughed at the budget. They have no idea what it is they signed up to. He said he would stay out of the single market. He's going into the single market for agri-food, electricity and energy. He said he'd stay out of the customs union, but he is accepting EU tariff rules. How does he plan to stop the EU changing them to our disadvantage? He has no idea, neither do any of them. Because the British people know, Mr. Speaker, when they are being misled. They know that headlines fail. He didn't listen to the CBI on the jobs tax. He didn't listen to the FSB on the family farms tax. This deal has already unravelled. The damage is becoming clear. The political consequences will be huge. And here he is trumpeting his success. And when he stands up in a moment, he'll deflect, he'll dismiss, he'll distract. But we all know the truth. This was a fiction of a speech, a fraud of a deal, a failure of a Prime Minister.
Here Starmer just walks straight into a political firestorm. What he hailed as a historic step toward mending ties with the EU has backfired spectacularly. Within hours, the deal crumbled under fierce opposition. Applause? Nowhere to be found. Instead, Parliament descended into chaos. Critics are calling it a full-blown betrayal of Brexit. Reckless, out of touch and dangerously naive, the backlash is snowballing, and it's not just bruising his reputation, it's threatening to tear the foundation out from under his leadership.
The fact is that we are on the brink of witnessing yet another disastrous Labour deal, because we know that when Labour negotiates, Britain loses. And to leave the House in no doubt, if and when my party is back in power, we will reverse any handover of power, any imposition of EU law, any new rights for the ECJ, and any new budgetary commitments. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's my party that took the country out of the EU, and it's my party that will keep it out.
But the fury isn't just coming from political opponents. Starmer's own ranks are in open rebellion. What started as murmurs of doubt has exploded into full-blown mutiny. Long-time allies are vanishing. Backbenchers are breaking ranks live on air, And for the first time in years, Parliament is rallying around a no-confident motion that's picking up speed like a runaway train. At the heart of the uproar, one word: betrayal. Starmer once promised to uphold the will of the people. Now, his critics say he's dismantling it piece by piece. They're accusing him of sneaking Brexit into reverse, of loosening Britain's grip on its sovereignty, and quietly cracking open the EU door voters slammed shut nearly a decade ago. This isn't just political disagreement. It's an all-out war. And with this single move, Starmer may have just turned his back on the very legacy he swore to defend.
That promise has lasted about as long as his commitment to protect pensioners' winter fuel allowance. He said whatever was needed to win power, Mr. Speaker, and now he'll say whatever is needed to keep it, even if it means selling out our sovereignty, our businesses, and the public. The truth is,
the fury hit a boiling point the moment the fine print came to light. Hidden deep in Starmer's so-called breakthrough was a ticking time bomb, a clause granting EU fishing fleets extended access to British waters until 2038, not a short-term compromise. 12 more years of foreign trawlers draining UK seas while struggling coastal towns are left watching their livelihoods vanish. But this outrage isn't just about economics. It's about betrayal of identity. For fishing communities, this was never just about fish. It was about control. Brexit was their battle cry, a promise to end unfair deals like this. They were told they'd finally have a say. Instead, they're watching history repeat itself. Another EU power play dressed up as diplomacy. In places like Grimsby and Fraserburgh, this isn't politics, it's survival. They're not poring over trade terms, they're watching their future slip through the cracks. And the message they hear loud and clear? Brussels wins again. And Britain's coastal heartlands are left behind to pick up the pieces. To critics, this isn't diplomacy, it's defeat. Far from a clever strategy, the deal is being slammed as a long-term capitulation. Analysts warn it guts Britain's leverage in future talks, binding the country into a decade of lopsided negotiations. But it's the optics that sting just as much. Handing EU trawlers extended access to British waters, barely years after Brexit, sends a brutal message. Starmer isn't standing up for British sovereignty, he's bending toward Brussels. And before the storm over fishing could even settle, another fire broke out. Starmer quietly approved a youth mobility scheme, opening the doors to EU citizens aged 18 to 30 to live and work in the UK for up to 3 years. Officially, it's wrapped in the language of cultural exchange. But the reality? Critics see it for what they believe it is. A backdoor reintroduction of free movement. There's no cap, no serious restrictions, no firm oversight. Just an open invitation that, to millions of Leave voters, feels like a slap in the face. This wasn't the border control they voted for. It's policy dressed up in disguise. And to them, it reeks of betrayal. For Brexit voters, this wasn't just a broken promise. It was a full-scale betrayal. Not a line crossed, but trampled. Immigration wasn't some side issue in 2016. It was the heartbeat of the vote. And now, with Starmer flinging the doors open through the youth mobility scheme, that core belief is being shattered. Inside Labour HQ, panic is setting in. Senior figures are watching in real time as Starmer doesn't just reopen the Brexit wounds, he sets the entire battlefield on fire. And the biggest winner? Nigel Farage. Reform UK just got the golden ticket it's been waiting for. The very bloc Labour needs to survive are slipping through their fingers and heading straight for the man who made Brexit his personal crusade. And Farage moved fast. While Labour scrambled to explain, he dominated the airwaves. Interviews, viral videos, and a wave of TikToks that lit up young voters' feeds. His message? Crystal clear. Starmer is tearing Brexit apart. This isn't a policy disagreement, it's full-blown political warfare. And Farage is painting Starmer as the face of surrender, shaking hands in Brussels while ignoring the people of Whitby and Stoke. Reform UK's digital momentum is exploding, powered not by retirees, but by younger, furious voters who feel Brexit is being stolen from them. The optics are brutal. Starmer is now being cast as the poster boy for globalism, posing with EU leaders in photo apps while the ground beneath him crumbles at home. At a time when voter trust is hanging by a thread, every handshake in Brussels feels like another bullet in Farage's political arsenal. Labour tries to spin it as economic pragmatism, but Farage's message is cutting through louder and cleaner. This isn't smart diplomacy, it's surrender. And the deeper you look into Starmer's so-called reset, the clearer it becomes. This isn't a course correction, it's a full-blown U-turn, a hard shift back toward the very institutions Brexit was meant to escape. UK farming? Dragged back under the EU's food and welfare rules, putting British agriculture right back under Brussels' thumb. Legal sovereignty? Cracked open again, with new pathways for the European Court of Justice to creep back in. An institution Leave voters thought they'd left behind for good. And then there's the buried bombshell, the defence clause. Tucked deep in the fine print is a framework for joint military coordination with the EU, shared strategy, early-stage planning. To some, it reads like a blueprint for a future European army. This isn't diplomatic window dressing. These aren't minor tweaks. It's a foundational shift. Quiet, strategic, and unmistakable. And to millions of voters, it feels like the UK is slipping right back into the very grip they fought to break free from. Supporters argue these deals will smooth trade and untangle red tape. But critics see something far more dangerous. A silent slide back into the very web of entanglements Brexit was meant to cut through. They're warning of a precedent no one voted for. Sweeping backroom agreements that trade away sovereignty for short-term political optics. And now the backlash isn't just loud, it's volcanic. Tory MPs are openly floating a no-confident vote. Reform UK is calling for an emergency general election. But the real tremors? They're shaking Labour to its core. Starmer's team can feel it. The ground is moving beneath their feet. Once loyal allies are freezing up, the fractures are no longer whispers, they're becoming fault lines. What started as private discomfort has turned into quiet rebellion. Strategy meetings are happening behind closed doors, new alliances are forming in the shadows, and inside Labour HQ, one question is echoing louder than ever. Stick with Starmer or risk losing everything, especially the Brexit heartlands they vowed to win back. And the silence? It's deafening. MPs are dodging cameras. Others are carefully rewriting their talking points. Behind the scenes, some are calling the deal political suicide. Reform UK is gaining ground by the day. And across the party, the alarm bells aren't just ringing, they're screaming. Behind the scenes, Starmer is reportedly livid, furious at the backlash, furious at his own party. Sources say he's lashed out at internal critics, accusing them of betrayal and even threatening deselection. But the anger won't change the outcome. The damage is done. What was meant to showcase bold leadership is now being branded, even by some within Labour, as a catastrophic blunder. The strategy was simple: roll the deal out quietly, bury the details in bureaucratic language, dangle a few economic perks, and hope the storm would never come. But it didn't just leak, it exploded. And the fallout hasn't faded into the background. It's taken centre stage. Now, Starmer isn't just fighting critics in Parliament. He's battling a growing wave of disillusionment from voters who feel misled. Every headline, every soundbite, every silence from Labour MPs adds fuel to the fire. And the public, they're not just noticing, they're taking notes. In towns like Hull, Plymouth and Redcar, the outrage is visceral. To locals, this isn't some distant policy tweak. It cuts deep. It feels personal. Protests are forming. Petitions are gathering steam. And local councils are facing mounting pressure as frustration spills into the streets. Labour's comms team is scrambling to rebrand the deal as a modern Brexit. But for Leave voters, that spin falls flat. This was never about passport lines or customs delays. It was about sovereignty, about control. And now many feel that the promise of 2016 is being quietly torn up behind closed doors. Across the country, the same word keeps surfacing: betrayal, and it's leaving a mark.
Defence commitments in this deal are hopelessly one-sided. We're making payments, but they are offering dialogue and consultation. This is a pitiful return for the country that leads NATO in Europe with troops on the ground in Estonia defending our allies. Can the Prime Minister tell us why there's not a single word in his statement about the money we will now be sending to Brussels? And can he set out how much those payments will cost taxpayers? Mr. Speaker, in government, details matter, and so does honesty. They're laughing, but this is a bad deal for the country. Look at them. This is how they laughed at the budget. They have no idea what it is they signed up to. He said he would stay out of the single market. He's going into the single market for agri-food, electricity and energy. He said he'd stay out of the customs union, but he is accepting EU tariff rules. How does he plan to stop the EU changing them to our disadvantage? He has no idea, neither do any of them. Because the British people know, Mr. Speaker, when they are being misled. They know that headlines fail. He didn't listen to the CBI on the jobs tax. He didn't listen to the FSB on the family farms tax. This deal has already unraveled. The damage is becoming clear. The political consequences will be huge. And here he is trumpeting his success. And when he stands up in a moment, he'll deflect, he'll dismiss, he'll distract. But we all know the truth. This was a fiction of a speech, a fraud of a deal, a failure of a Prime Minister.
Reform UK is surging in the polls. Starmer's approval is slipping fast. And those once solid red wall seats, they're no longer safe. They're back in play, teetering on the edge of a political landslide. This isn't just a political misstep. It's the spark of a slow-moving constitutional crisis. One that's reopening the very wounds Brexit was meant to close. By pulling the UK back into EU systems on trade, law, defence and migration, Starmer has reignited the core tensions of sovereignty, trust and national identity. Now, with a no-confident vote circling and his party fracturing beneath him, Starmer's leadership hangs by a thread. This isn't political drama, it's a defining moment, one that could tear open Labour, shake the walls of Parliament and redraw Britain's future relationship with Europe for a generation. If this breakdown gave you a clearer view of what's really unfolding, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more political deep dives. Thanks for watching.